All right. Hey, how you doing? This is Shane.
And this is Brian.
Brian's frisky. So, we're two horror fans. We've been horror fans forever. We've seen horror podcasts, and frankly, we think they kind of suck. So, if you want the real, if you want real horror, not talked by a bunch of pussies, but like people who fucking like the extreme shit, then we're going to be your guys. We're going to call
Again,
ourselves Horror Junkies, and the first episode we're doing is on torture porn. So, the show, we're going to probably try to shoot this once a month to start out and eventually do live streaming. But what we're really trying to do here is touch up on all kinds of horror, uh, real and cinema. So, we'll do some episodes on serial killers, we'll do some episodes on writers, artists, everything horror.
technically, technically, we're not supposed to be doing serial killer Shane because you don't want to be accused of glorifying them.
Well, we're fucking doing it anyways. So, torture porn. So, where did the term come from? Well, this was a hipster guy from New York Magazine. I think he was for the New Yorker. Termed the porn, coined the term torture porn. He wrote an article in 2007, and the article title was, and I have it right here because I forgot it, playing at your local multiplex torture porn. And this was due to that wave of torture porn. So, what is torture porn? We hear the term, well, what is it? What does it include? Well, what it doesn't include necessarily is sex and sleaze and blood and gore. Those are all elements that are great and we love them. But really, torture porn is about the actual torture of a person. Like, there has to be torture in it, really, realistically, for it to be it. The idea that torture porn was just sort of like a passing fancy, I think we're going to prove that that's wrong. And we'll talk a little bit right now about what the history of torture porn is. And Brian, you were talking about the Grand Guignol before.
Yeah, yeah. The Grand Guignol was a theater um, uh, theater that ran in France, and they ran actually from the 1800s all the way to the 1960s. They shut down finally in the 1960s, which is kind of funny because that's like when Herschel Gordon Lewis was like making movies. So they literally shut down because of Herschel Gordon Lewis. I'm kidding about that part, but yeah. Anyway, the Grand Guignol was a theater that specialized in plays of horror. There is usually torture scenes. There were people getting their eyes gouged out and stuff like that, and it was all done on stage with like gore effects, you know.
Well, much later too. Even though it was done mostly for like religious purposes, Herman, I believe his name's Nietzsche.
Mm-hmm.
Herman Nietzsche, I think is his name.
Mm-hmm.
He's a German composer, and then he was a filmmaker. Was doing these religious sort of movies that had a lot of gore in it, and would
Yeah.
show like the crucifixion, and it was really gory and violent. And I suppose torture.
So Herman Nietzsche, this Herman Nietzsche guy
If I'm saying his name right.
was basically doing like Passion of the Christ before there was Passion of the Christ.
Yeah, and Passion of the Christ, like, to me, isn't that big a deal. I mean, there's some cool, like, torture sequences in it, but it's,
Yeah.
the massholes are gotta, like, hold on to their titties when it comes to that shit. You know?
Yeah.
So some of the other early influences, we're talking the Black Cat, 19, what was that,
34.
34. Great film with Lugosi and Karloff in it. And it had, like, really one torture scene in it, but really set sort of the tone and the mood for this sort of cold human indifference to suffering. And or the pleasure one gets from it, which I think are key aspects when it comes to torture porn. There's either a distance thing for more, or there's a get on. You get off on it, like one of the two, or both, and maybe more. I don't know. You know?
Yeah, and that is basically in the way the film's structured. That's like true torture porn, I guess, because it's like the scene at the end where Karloff gets like skinned.
Mm-hmm.
That's like basically the whole movie's building to that, and that's like the money shot.
Gotcha. And so let's move on. So we got Fu Manchu. You said Fu Manchu was. I'm not really familiar with those movies, so hit me.
Yes, those were definitely kind of like torture porn before they were torture porn. Because literally, Fu Manchu was like this Asian supervillain, basically, during the era when everybody was like paranoid. Everybody in America, I should say, was like during the 30s. They were like paranoid of outsiders.
Uh-huh.
So they had this whole Asian peril thing going on. And Fu Manchu was like a supervillain who's trying to conquer the world and stuff. But the reason why those movies are torture porn, or early torture porn, I guess you can call them, is the emphasis, like, because like Fu Manchu was like always gonna like capture the good guys.
Yes.
And he need to interrogate him for some reason. So the emphasis was always on, oh, what evil torture is Fu Manchu gonna devise next?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know,
All right. Witchfinder General. That one's pretty graphic in the sort of, well, of course, the Salem witch trials and burning witches and just diving into that.
Yes.
Pit and the Pendulum.
Yeah. And also the Witchfinder General is the precursor to movies like Mark of the Devil, which I think we're going to talk about later.
Yes, we're going to bring on Mark of the Devil later. So we're just going to touch base on some of these movies. We're not going to go into the whole review analysis of them.
Right.
Just kind of touch base on them. Salo being a big one. Being a huge one where, like, basically he was, at some point, what was his name? Pasolini was assassinated.
Yes. Yeah, he was murdered in real life. That actually happened.
Do you remember what it was from?
No, I don't remember how that story went. No. I just know he was killed. And I was going to say a lot of, or of course, another, I guess, influence, you can say, on torture porn tying into Salo would be like the Marquis de Sade and like his writings. You know,
yeah, we'll get into the writings in a little bit.
Yeah, I'm just mentioning as it ties into Salo, you know. But yeah, Salo was definitely like an early one, you know. It's like, because the whole point of the movie basically is literally like these evil rich assholes have these young people hostage and they can do whatever they want with them. And so they spend their time like just torturing them, humiliating them, you know, that kind of thing. Making them eat poop, which they do. Gotcha.
So if you're wondering what the sheet is, I actually wrote out stuff in chapter outline shit for this. So this isn't like these.
He's very prepared.
So this isn't like these like online horror things where you just see this fucker talking about it and talking out of his ass. I actually did some research on this stuff. Silence of the Lambs, I think there's a little bit of torture porn in that. I mean, maybe not a ton, but I think I wanted to bring that one up because that was sort of like the main movie that had the idea of that the monster was a human being. It was the human being was the monster, and that sort of predicates some of the torture porn. That,
and I was going to say, and of course, there's like a direct line of thought between like Psycho and Silence of the Lambs, the human as a monster and that kind of thing. You know, poor troubled Norman Bates.
Cannibal films, you know, we have, cannibal films are they torture porn? Yeah, they definitely can be. And of course, the ones, Cannibal Ferox would be to me like the shining example of this, where you really see like the torture of the outsiders in that, and that being like the one that's really pronounced in my mind.
Oh yeah, because there's definitely a emphasis on torture because like for instance there's that it's not like the cannibals just capture these civilized white people and
Mhm.
kill them.
Yeah.
You know, they torture them first. Like, there's that one scene where the girl gets, like, hooks in her tits and she's, like, hung up. You know?
I call that the push-up bra.
Yeah, that you didn't know that, folks. The push-up bra was invented by native savages.
So, you know, and of course there's Amazonia, Cannibal Holocaust. There's so many of those cannibal
Yeah.
films. And don't get mad if I didn't list your cannibal movie. Because I'm sure I missed one of your cannibal movies. So, like I said, we're just kind of
Some-
highlighting here.
Some guy's going to be watching this and he's going to be like, why didn't you mention Slave of the Cannibal God? What's
Well-
wrong with you?
Well, there's a ton more. Let's switch gears. So when did this really become like a phenomenon? And we both, I think we know that it really, where I think the real kind of national recognition, if not world recognition, started with these movies right here. This is the Saw pack right here. I have all the Saw movies. And these started, what, 2003?
Yeah, somewhere in there, yep.
So these were the ones that actually had, like, the human monster aspect that we're talking about in Silence of the Lamb. And, you know, that these movies actually had really kind of self-inflicted torture. Usually in torture porn films, like...
Somebody is torturing them.
Yeah, this one's like... Well, they're being tortured by somebody, but it's being done in a way where the person's actually creating their own pain. Of course, we love these movies. They have the bear traps and all the different booby traps and all this stuff in them.
Yeah.
And I think this movie really, to me, was the one that sort of like, to me, got it off the ground running. And if you have a disagreement, that's fine. I mean, you can just post it below. That's fine. We'll respond to the comments when we can. So yeah, Saw. And then, of course, with Saw, you know, started the some of the other big American movies, The Girl Next Door, the movie that the worst reviewed torture porn movie, Captivity, which I'm actually going to buy a copy of. I don't have it.
Yeah, I've seen Captivity. It's pretty bad.
Borderland, The Strangers, Murder Set Pieces, these kind of movies. And then we want to talk real quick about like the shot on video stuff and Fred Vogel's movies, which we don't have any of. But his was a big part, I think, of torture porn, especially how realistic the gore scenes are in his movies. I'm not a big fan of the first August Underground. I do like the...
I know that a lot of people think Fred Vogel's like the shit or whatever, but I always found his stuff to be kind of hit or miss.
Okay.
I do like that movie Maskhead, though. Maskhead's awesome.
So I think what made, you know, within two, like when cell phones got big and where you could take photos on cell phones and everybody was filming themselves or other people, like, I don't know where that coincides in with the Vogel stuff, but the idea of taping someone and became a lot easier for people. And I think that the August Underground movies kind of tap into the idea of filming somebody and how easy it is. Of course, they're using a camcorder in that, but just the idea of the accessibility of filming people can get, I guess, can be kind of eerie, kind of creepy, but, you know, in my personal opinion, kind of fucking cool. And, you know, speaking of low budget, I mean, of course, we're talking Murder Set Pieces, The Bunny Game, oh, God, there's so many. Wolf Creek, The Devil's Rejects, House of a Thousand Corpses, and we're talking all these great movies that have torture porn in them. And yes, I think Devil's Rejects is torture porn. Absolutely. How can it not be? They're torturing people in that movie. And another guy who was making kind of low budget, really, really in-your-face shit was Beelzebub. And this is the movie Breaking... Oh, wow, that's going to glare. Breaking the Will.
Yeah.
Breaking Her Will, sorry.
Yeah.
So, Brian, you want to talk a little bit about Breaking Her Will?
Speaking of hit or miss, Mr. Beelzebub.
Yeah, but you want to let the...
Essentially, it's kind of like this guy who's kind of a dork. In fact, that's actually one of the big problems with Breaking the Will is the guy is literally such a dork and a whiner. But anyway, this essentially it's this guy who's a dork, and decides he's gonna kidnap this girl and make her his sex slave, right? So he does that, and then the whole movie is basically about like the process of like training her and conditioning her to become his sex slave. That, by the way, is what the social justice people nowadays refer to as grooming. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Another byproduct of toxic masculinity.
So, before we go any further and we talk about maybe some of the world stuff, we should mention there's all kinds of different exploitation movies like nunsploitation, definitely women in prison films, all kinds of films that have torture porn in it. I think what we're talking about, though, is most of the movie is devoted to torture porn.
Yeah.
Some of the movies we're mentioning are just kind of influences, not necessarily the same thing.
It's funny you mentioned the nuns movies, because I was going to actually, as one of the DVDs to show, I was actually going to grab The Sinful Nuns of St. Valentine, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Maybe I should have.
So the next thing, just want to take kind of a stab on it here real quick is Rape and Revenge. That pretty much, especially the one that we all know, is to me the Citizen Kane of Rape and Revenge movies, and that's I Spit on Your Grave. So this is the remake, which I just watched this weekend, and it's fucking great. These are definitely movies that involve lots of torture. Not quite like the drilling holes in people or like taking off a foot like an audition, but the torture of for the lead girl Jennifer Hills, the torture of not being able to escape this circumstance. Like she can't get away, there's too many of them, and just how they use that in the movie is a way of like showing this woman's like despair and her inability to, like I said, she can't get out of this situation. She kind of knows what's coming, and that's the terrifying part really in these movies. And of course this has some great fucking revenge scenes in it, awesome revenge scenes in it, and it's kind of cold, it's got a coldness to it and stuff like that. But like I said, I don't want to really review these, but I Spit on Your Grave, amongst other great rape and revenge movies, Miss 45, I would say
Miss 45, of course. The other one I think you could say is like the Citizen Kane of rape and revenge movies would be something like Last House on the Left, maybe.
Yeah.
Depending.
So we talk about all these movies that came out, and of course the French New Wave was the huge sort of like, they blame the French New Wave really for torture porn. I thank the French for torture porn, for creating this new wave of torture porn. I love it. I love how like the French New Wave was torture porn, but sort of like they called it the French New Wave because it was the comeback for French horror, which is kind of, that's tit for tat. And of course, Calvaire and Frontiers and Martyrs and High Tension, which isn't necessarily straight torture porn, but was part of the French New Wave of cinema. It's worth mentioning. And this wonderful dandy of a movie, Inside. So, Inside's a pretty dark movie, and if you're pregnant, please don't watch this because you're not going to like what happens in it. Pretty terrifying in a way, especially for pregnant moms. So do you want to say anything about Inside?
Well, just that that DVD right there is not the original. That's actually the Spanish remake, which they say isn't as good. It's kind of watered down. But I just kind of grabbed it because I wanted to have like some sort of visual representation, and I couldn't find the rest of them.
Okay, so this isn't the original.
French New Wave.
This isn't the original. Thanks for fucking All right,
No,
no, mind. I'm just kidding.
I told you that before.
So German stuff, of course. The German stuff's weird because can there be torture porn with dead people? And of course, I'm talking about like the necromantic movies where the stiff is probably not complaining if it has some sort of weird spiritual afterlife, but the stiffy definitely gets some hair pie in that one.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of the German films that were torture porn inspired, and of course, the big one to me that I can think of off the top of my head is Human Centipede. This is Human Centipede 2. These are great fucking movies. These are so much fun and so great and so disgusting in a great way. And so I wanted to add the Human Centipede in here because it is torture. It's torture done in such an unimaginable way that it's not like the dink and dunk torture where they just got you tied up in a room. It's much, much worse. You're tied to somebody's fucking asshole. So, you got anything you want to say about Human Centipede?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, if the first one wasn't torture enough to qualify as torture porn, the second one definitely is. Because by that one, it goes so off the rails. You have scenes where, like, centipedes, like the actual arachnid centipedes are being inserted into people's rectums, and a guy's like masturbating with sandpaper and just
you gotta love that. So we gotta, of course, spin it over and talk about the Asian stuff. I mean, of course, I think the one movie that like is true and blue to everyone's understanding of torture porn would be Audition. And albeit Audition doesn't have torture all the way through, it is a sort of it's sort of a build up. It's like two different movies. One is this kind of slow paced love story, and then the second one is just a face melt fucking freak show that has the good torture porn in it. Mm-hmm. So not completely torture porn, but definitely I would throw it in the area. It does concentrate on the at the end of the movie. You're definitely getting a healthy dose of torture thrown your way, and of course, the Untold Story. What are those Category 3 films?
Yeah, the Category 3 films, which is at the time anyway, that was the highest rated, or the most intense rated, most extreme rated, however you want to call it, a movie can be in like China or Hong Kong. So if you came to like a movie theater and they're showing a Category 3 movie, you knew you're gonna see some intense shit.
Okay, cool. Of course, Guinea Pig and all those movies, Tumbling Down of Flesh, which is such a torture porn movie where it's nothing but torture all the way through. It's almost like one of those definable torture porn movies. Yeah. Lots of those movies, of course, we got.
And crazily enough, this is a true story, by the way. When I saw Tumbling Down of Flesh, I actually saw it here on YouTube because somebody temporarily like uploaded it, and it was on there for a while before somebody found out and it got pulled.
Yeah, cool. So there's this little gem of a movie called Brutal that has got some great torture porn in this. It's a very weird love story, and so the torture porn stuff got into like sort of this idea of a romanticizing sort of life through death and that kind of thing. And this movie is a solid example of like how this guy can't function and how he finally finds love, albeit maybe a little too late, and I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, pretty much no mercy kind of bloodfest. And then if you want to talk about this one, The Curse M.
Okay, so yeah, and this is actually a good lead into something I wanted to talk about too. Is one of the precursors to torture porn is the Asians, particularly the Japanese, were doing these like really, really fucked up like bondage movies back in the 70s, like the Flower and Snake series, Beautiful Girl Hunter, and all those, where it's like it was essentially it was essentially like, again, girls getting kidnapped, and like there's a lot of bondage sex, but it's like there's also like these weird things going on where like
You can see the bondage in there, guys.
girls were like getting killed, and YouTube's gonna flag us. Like girls were getting killed and stuff like that too. So it's kind of like it was part like bondage sex film, and these movies were also like part horror film, I guess. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
And I think we need to cover one movie in particular. One movie that is kind of considered one of the more controversial movies ever made, that has definitely elements of torture porn in it, but also is such a obnoxiously over-the-top movie that, considered the most disturbing movie ever made, and that's the Serbian Film. Now, if you've seen the Serbian Film, like, to me, if you've seen the Serbian Film, and of course the directors of that movie, or a director or whatever, was really talking about censorship and wanted to really push what could be censored, and so there was so much anger about that that he sort of wanted to take it as far as he could take it, and the Serbian Film takes it pretty far. My opinion on the Serbian Film, though, is it's done in such an over-the-top way that when there are scenes of violence and trauma, that it's almost cartoonish. And it's not as like I've heard people go, oh, it'll change you, and it's this and that. And it's like it's so over the top that it's kind of ridiculous in a way.
Yeah.
Definitely, it's got some elements of despair, and I like it. I'm not shitting on the movie at all, but I mean, I'm telling you, the thing with torture porn, and that's what we're going to kind of segue into. And of course, we probably missed a ton of movies, so just, you can leave comments below. I can't believe they didn't mention this movie.
I can't believe they didn't talk about Hostel.
Hostel. Hostel's an important movie that we should talk about. Hostel really kind of, as Saw sort of introduced it to the world, Hostel sort of solidified it as a commerce that you can make money off these movies. So Hostel is a real important movie that we should have not have skipped. But, there's so many of these fucking movies, it's impossible. So, my favorite part of the show, what do we like about torture porn? What is it that about torture porn that I liked or you like? And because when these movies came out, horror was still generally pretty good. Like, horror movies were good, and they were as intense as they ever got.
Yeah.
One thing before we get into this, let's not forget Australia, and let's not forget Wolf Creek, and let's not forget, what's that one called, The Loved Ones?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's not forget Australia. So Wolf Creek, we want to make sure we give a shout out for that wonderful movie.
And of course, other classics from Australia in the past,
Turkey Shoot,
Turkey Shoot, and one of our favorites, Fair Game.
So,
we're gonna tie this lady to a truck.
Yeah. So, so what is it about torture porn that would be likable? Because it's such a despicable act. What would make somebody enjoy these kind of movies? I think for me, it was torture porn was the last time that movies felt serious. And of course, I'll touch base on this in a second. Of course, there's seriously intellectual post-horror garbage that's out right now. But,
Shane, frickin' Hereditary is serious.
Well,
it's serious. It's got themes.
Well, fuck Hereditary, but but I felt like those movies made you feel like they made you feel either horrible or they made you feel enlightened in some sort of weird way, or they made, like in Martyrs, or they made you feel or you got your sick fantasies out watching these things.
Yes.
Which, if you're gonna,
which was definitely a case of the ones they made in Japan back in the 70s, like the Flower and Snake movies. Those were all for like guys who have like bondage fantasies and extreme fantasies and stuff like that.
So I think that for me anyways, torture porn sort of related to a deeper level of like sort of ugly desires I have that I would love to tap into but can't. And so I think that for me were kind of a release, and we've heard this before, and I think there's a lot of truth to it. Especially most horror fans that like the extreme stuff hate the way the world's set up, hate all the systems and all the bullshit that's in place, and we want to create as much malevolence and chaos as possible. And I mean, I'm a creative person, so is Brian here. So we've made movies and we've written scripts and stories and all that. And if it wasn't for that, I would probably be in prison. I don't know where Brian would be. Probably in an asylum. So to me, I can only say that torture porn helped relieve a part of me that I don't want it really. I don't mind admitting exists, but you can't really talk to people about it because they're so uncomfortable with it. So this this show is for fucking serious horror fans. If you're a pussy, don't watch this show. I mean,
we're not watch.
We're not going to talk. We're not going to We're not going to really soft sell shit on here. We're going to fucking talk about it. So. If people don't like it, then don't watch it. I don't give a fuck. So, Brian, what do you like about torture porn?
I'm a sick fuck. What?
Oh, yeah.
No, I've always liked extreme stuff, and and it's, if anything, it's kind of like, it's like I was saying to you a little while ago. It's like. Almost like it seems these movies were made like 20 years from I guess it would have been 20 years, but they seem longer than that. It seems like these movies were almost made like 50 years ago or something, because the political climate right now is so fucked up. It's almost like you couldn't make movies like these on like a Hollywood level, because let's remember, like Saw and Hostel and a lot of these movies played in theaters, and it's like you can do that because, oh my God, heaven forbid, it's not politically correct. You can't portray women as victims. That's a no-no.
Well, I mean, I think there's real truth to the idea that these movies seemed farther back than what they really were. This wasn't that long ago. This was like 15 years ago.
Yeah, 15, 20 years ago.
And I thought back then, I was as excited about horror movies back then as I had ever been in my 20s and in my teens. I've been a lifetime horror fan, or even when I was a real little kid, because there was a real sense of ugliness. And really, these movies, if they weren't going to scare you, they were going to make you feel ugly. And I'll take that over this post-horror garbage where they're trying to make you think, and they want to explore fucking themes, but don't explain the fucking themes like movies can. Movies really can't explain themes that well anyways. Oh, they explore themes of grief and Hereditary. Whip the fucking shit.
But what does it really say about grief?
And I think, as we look at horror going forward, in the history of horror, like torture porn would be one of those subgenres, or whatever you want to call it, movements that would love, horror fans themselves would love to sort of sweep under the carpet and forget about, because they want to intellectualize horror films and make horror movies more important. Horror movies always been the fucking, to me, Brian, the redheaded stepchild of the film industry, and that's what we loved about it. There was a rebellion to it. There was an attack to the senses. That's what I liked about it. It was like punk rock, but a film version of it. There was a real rebellion to it. So, like, to me, like, trying to make it smarter and more artistic takes away from what I fucking liked about it in the first place.
And like I said, it doesn't really make any sense because I didn't say it in this video, but I say this quite a bit. Actually, it's like their logic doesn't make any sense because it's like, all those snobs that thumbed their nose at horror back in the day, we're gonna prove them wrong by putting out a snobby product. It's like, what?
So we're, I really don't want to talk about this. This is going to be one of these shows that we really don't want to talk about this too much. Are like social themes, and of course with torture porn, of course, especially with Hostel, the idea of 9/11's influence on the torture porn. So.
I was going to say, I think that there is something to that, though. And it's not necessarily 9/11 itself.
Yeah.
But I think it was some of the things that happened because of 9/11 that you know what I mean? Like, specifically like the Abu Ghraib stuff.
Yeah.
Where, like, troops were, like, literally torturing Middle Eastern, like, prisoners and stuff like that. You know, I think that aspect definitely had an influence on torture porn because all of a sudden, you know, it's like you were talking earlier about cell phones and stuff. People were filming this stuff, and it was on like the public's mind, you know. So you had all these people who were smart enough to say, "Let's exploit this for $1."
Well, I think the thing about 9/11 is. The thing is this is like all because like movies can like express like societal fears like Texas Chainsaw Massacre did, it doesn't necessarily like to me make it like more intellectual. It's like these asshole college professors that are horror fans, or these these critics, these writers, all these people who are horror fans are looking for reasons to try to make horror more intellectual. Yeah. It's bullshit. It's like it's such garbage because what you're really doing though is you're really trying to explain ugliness in a way that has some sort of social value, and it doesn't fucking work. And it's very stupid, and to me it's very limited. These people think they're so fucking smart, and they're not smart at all. They're fucking
and I was gonna say, once upon a time in another life, I was an English major, so don't even get me started on the fucking goddamn college professors.
Okay. So
it's still a source.
So you see what kind of tea we're drinking out of. So some of y'all aren't gonna like this. Some of you, I hope you stick around. If you're sick, fuck, please stick around. Or as D. Snyder would say, if you're an SMF, please stick around. So, where's torture porn going? Is it done with? Is it out of the past? I don't think so. There's still movies being made that are really, really, really troublesome. One was the Necro Sluts made or whatever.
Oh, actually, I think Necro Sluts was made back in the day.
Oh, was it? Oh.
And it just wasn't released until like later.
Damn it! Fuck it! Don't forget it. And then of course there was all those like puke and vomit movies that what's his name was doing. Lucifer Valentine. But those aren't like true torture porn movies, not necessarily.
Yeah, well, sort of.
Somewhat. Well, I guess so.
And that actually ties into a lot of like porn right now. Because actually, a lot of porn right now is almost like that. Because they got like freaking shit where they're like gagging women and making them throw up and like all this craziness, you know. And but that's always been true of porn. There's always been that torture aspect of it. Because back in the 70s, they had those roughies or whatever they called, where like movies like I have a few of them on DVD. It's like they're like Intruders or something like that, where these guys break into a woman's house and
I guess the next thing is, so where's it going? I mean, have we seen torture porn in movies? Yeah, I think we've seen them. I mean, the last
Yeah.
Saw one came out with Chris Rock, The Spiral. Even though it didn't have true blue porn, it still like had aspects of torture porn in it. A movie called Black Phone, where this kid is being abducted.
Mm-hmm.
So there is, it's still alive. It's still there, but it's kind of probably what we're going to see. What we're going to see is we're going to have to see a real underground rebellion where underground filmmakers like ourselves or other people are so sick of the fucking status quo and the political correctness, they're going to make it out of anger, just like in Serbian film.
Yeah.
It's going to happen here. I think that's one way it's going to reinvent itself. And the other way is I think it's always going to kind of hide itself in movies. There's going to be elements of torture porn in movies, but not complete torture porn.
Yeah, it's kind of like I was going to say too. That's true, because what's going to happen if it hasn't happened already is you're going to get guys who are, they're going to be in a situation like this one where it's all politically correct and they can't do what the guys before them did. But you're going to have guys come in that grew up on like Saw and Hostel and stuff like that, and they're going to figure out a way to take some of that stuff and apply it to a movie that's more mainstream. But actually, as far as torture porn goes, I think the future of torture porn, if it's going to continue, and I think it will, it's either going to be on a lower budgeted level, or it's going to be from foreign countries, most notably Japan. Japan, they just don't give a shit over there. They don't.
Okay. So, that's kind of what we're talking about tonight. I mean, there's probably a lot more we could have discussed, obviously, but we're just, when we do these shows, we're not going to get in too much depth. We're going to have kind of a discussion about it, and then we're going to move on. But to me, the one I keep saying the epic rise of the torture porn was probably one of my favorite times watching horror movies, because even though I had seen the jump scare and the pull away, like they pull somebody away that they're doing over and over again in the new movies, that feeling of complete like the feeling of complete like empathy for somebody who's either gonna die or is going to torture, to me, I mean, and I'm probably like a lot of people where I feel pretty detached from human nature or from human beings anyway. So sometimes these movies made me feel so strong for a character as sort of not let me back in the human race or any of that shit, but just reminded me that I'm a human being, I would say.
And that's one part of torture porn that I think
it's underrated. Really.
Well, I was going to say that's actually one thing you can throw in that's a positive, I guess, because a lot of people would just concentrate on the darker aspects of it. You know, is again, given the movie and how well it's done or whatever. It can be a movie that gets you to feel greatly for, you know, these characters and what they have to endure, you know.
And I think what it does, though, on a grander level, is it does make you more aware of people's suffering in the real world, too. Like, you become, like, if you're so detached, and it's easy to be cynical, and it's easy to be detached in this world, and this cold and fucking uncaring world sometimes, that if it takes a movie to awaken you again to that, then fucking so be it. Who cares? You know?
And it yanks you out of your bubble of safety, because there's too many people like that too. God, my bubble of safety.
Well, we'll talk about that a later date. All right, so we're gonna wrap this up. Hopefully, you guys liked today's show.
Yeah.
This is Horror Junkies. Our next episode is going to be a dandy. It's going to be the modern horror fan and way we hate these assholes.
Yeah,
The modern horror fan. And you'll have to understand that we're not talking about every one of you. We're talking about these, like, fucking safe white people that like horror movies and they're the biggest pussy cowards in the world. We're going to be talking about that next week. Next time we have an episode.
This is guaranteed
To offend some asshole. Sure.
to make us enemies.
Yeah. So we're going to do it early on because we want to ferret out the pussies. You know,
Yeah.
we don't want the pussies. No pussies allowed on this show. So keep it real, keep it extreme, and keep the horror coming.